Hey guys, I just want to let you know ahead of time there are going to be spoilers to this book. So if you don't like the spoilers, uh, I understand, but I just thought to let you guys know ahead of time uh, as I be posting these. So, but if you're a Bray Wyatt fan and you want to just get to the meat of the Easter eggs, then this is the place to be. Now, I've noticed that a few people have mentioned that the book The Stand by Stephen King actually correlates a lot to Bray Wyatt in his career, not just the Wyatt Six, but his actual whole career as a whole also. And I just want to ask if you guys want to join me in looking at all these little Easter eggs. I've been reading for about an hour. I'm 2 chapters in so far. I've got about 8 pages of Easter eggs. Now, the time I've been spending on reading is about an hour. So, I don't want to make videos that are longer than an hour, you know. So, I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible and hopefully try to shed a little bit of the Easter eggs that I found with all of you guys. Now, so I'm going to review this a little bit. So, you have this gas station, and there's these guys that are working there that they own, and this car comes running through, crashes into these gas pumps, and makes like huge explosions or whatever. And these guys come running outside, and they were talking about, like, oh crap, that sucks. Like, I'm glad we have insurance, uh, you know. So they open up the car and they find this guy and this woman who's holding the hand of this child. Now, the woman and the child didn't survive, uh, and the guy that was driving did. So they yanked the guy out of the car that lived. They bring him into the office. They noticed that they looked really sick. All of them had really pale faces. The woman, she was wearing a long dress, and you could almost look at their faces and you could see the purple outlining their eyes, the dark eyes from them dying. They just looked sick, as if they ate like a poisoned hamburger. Uh, in the car, it kind of had like this red blue lighting, which correlates the red and blue with Wyatt. It's just crazy. We're gonna get into some crazy shit. Um. Anyway, so that happens. They talk to the guy. They tell him that they died, and whatever. And so that was like the first chapter. It was just kind of setting up. I think it was just kind of setting up a little bit of what you could imagine the story being, but I'm not quite sure yet because I haven't read the whole book. But anyway, it cuts to chapter 2, and there's this woman, and she's on this pier on this beach, and she's kind of just sitting there. Her legs are wiggling back and forth. She's just looking out, and she's crying, and she looks out to this guy who's out on the pier, who's got his back turned to her, and he's just staring off into the sunset as these waves are crashing. It seems like the sea starts crashing all around. It's funny because Bray Wyatt mentioned that he wanted to establish his castle by the sea, so he could watch his enemies drown. And that's something that he mentioned to Dexter Loomis in one of those VHS promos. He said they watched you drown, uh, all that stuff. Uh, anyway, he's wearing like this dark blue work shirt, which kind of, I was thinking it kind of reminded me of dark blue. So if you take Bo Dallas and he's doing those VHS promos, it almost seems like it's a blue, even though it's a black shirt, just because the lighting, right? And anyway, so they end up talking, and she mentions to this guy, his name is Jesse, and what she starts mentioning is that she's pregnant, and it started happening right around April. Uh, let's see. I think she said April 12th, 13th, 14th. I believe that's that. She told him that that's when she started noticing that she was pregnant, or when he got her pregnant. Now, I want to talk about, okay, so you have this survivor from this car crash. Now, there's a little significance about this. So, you have this survivor, this lady in this dress that and what's really funny is when you have the Raw massacre where the Wyatt Six laid out all these people, and even Chad Gable. Chad Gable was the main focal point, obviously, in that whole massacre. Now, what's funny about it is a week later, Chad Gable makes a promo on Raw, and he talks about that he's lucky that he survived the Wyatt attack. It was a miracle that he survived. Now, this guy in this car, uh, he talks about how it's a miracle that he survived as well. Now, this is where it gets really crazy. Now, so she goes out and talks to this woman. She goes out and talks to this Jess dude that's on the pier, and she accidentally ended up pushing herself and this guy into the water, and he got really mad about it, and she ended up biting her tongue, where she was bleeding for quite a while out of her mouth. She was bleeding all this red blood. And the book keeps pointing out that it's specific, bright red. It points that out several different times throughout this chapter. And I was kind of thinking about that. It's kind of interesting. Now, we'll get to that a little bit. Now, this guy ends up saying, hey, like, what the hell are you doing? You're being an idiot right now. What's your deal? And she thought it was kind of funny, this whole scenario of pushing him into the water. Now, it mentions that she kind of laughed at herself, kind of like in a goofy, kind of funny, silly, kind of prankster kind of way. Now, if you really think about it, okay, so after a week after the Wyatt massacre at Raw was the Nikki Cross promo, the Nikki Cross VHS tape, where Uncle Howdy sits her down and she's smiling, and he says, you need to look at yourself and what you've become. And I think about it, like she kind of has this goofy laughing silliness, and then she gets really serious and sad, which in that VHS, if you remember, she was laughing and smiling, Nikki Cross was, and then you hear nothing but silence, which that's what this girl was doing in this story. And then she laughs at herself, and then she just screams in pain and suffering. Just like this girl in the story, that's kind of what happened with Nikki Cross, if you really think about it. And you know what's awful interesting as well is that same night that she had that VHS promo was the same night that Bo Dallas said, we're here, basically. I set them free from the cave. I freed them, and we're here now. And it just gets really interesting. Because if you look at the video, you see Nikki Cross, that same VHS tape, she's dancing with someone. Now, some people have noted that maybe it's Dexter Loomis or somebody. I don't know. I don't think there's really any proof, but my opinion, it might be Uncle Howdy. Now, I'll get to that here in a minute. So she ends up crying, and then she has like this trifling, bitter laugh at herself. This girl in this story, her name is Fran. So he says, "Yeah, I'll set them free someday." Uh, and in this story, she says, "Yeah, I'm kind of messed up." In this book, The Stand, she says, "Yeah, I'm messed up." Like that's any news to anybody else in this world. If you really think about it, Nikki Cross, she was going through the same thing. She was just kind of just stifled. She was kind of just nothing. There was nothing going on with her. And in this book says, yeah. So when she met this guy Jesse. He brought the news of pearls, but it was mostly impending arrival of new things to come in their relationship. And she noticed that he was standing out on the pier, just kind of keeping to himself, sitting lonely, sitting kind of sad, kind of just by himself. And it kind of reminds me of Bo that same night when he had that VHS tape. He was having a lot of conflict with himself. Uncle Howdy asks you, "What, you think you're all that, and all that stuff? You think that you're special?" And Bray says, or not Bray, Bo says, "I'm nobody. I had to get these people that were willing to do this with me, essentially." The book goes on that he's sitting there lonely, in solitude, surveying the sea. And it made her crazy, kind of thinking about her own state of mind. Now you think about Nikki Cross. That's what Uncle Howdy did. He questioned Nikki Cross and made her rethink, look at herself and what she became, you know? And so it goes on to say that this woman is like the heroine of the story, which people have said that Nikki Cross, Sister Abigail, is supposed to represent the love and light, things like that. And as I get into the story further, I start to see that same pattern. Um, it says that in the book that he got her into that condition, but she fell out of love with him. So they continue this conversation and how she's pregnant, and they start looking uh, at all the different options of what they're going to do with the pregnancy. Now, she states that she thought that she was on the pill, and uh, apparently she forgot, and he started questioning her, and she would get so sick at the point that she'd be crawling on her knees, just trying to get back to normal. Now, if you look at Nikki Cross, when they debut, I mean, she's always crawling. Now, I think that kind of represents a little bit of Sister Abigail, maybe crawling, and then eventually, when you see them all together and she's with Uncle Howdy, she starts to stand up. When it involves Uncle Howdy, she stands on her feet. She feels reassured. She feels better from her sickness. And I think that's really significant. It says that her sides crash like the waters to her right and left. Now, if you look at it when they come, the Wyatt Six come out for their entrance, you have Dexter Loomis on one side, you have Joe Gacy on the other, and you have Uncle Howdy and Eric Rowan in the back. It's funny that you have waves crashing and it's talking about the sea and all these different significant things like Dexter Loomis and the sea and drowning, waves crashing and drowning. So he's on her right or her left, and then Gacy on the other side. I just think that's really interesting. So as they're talking, this guy Jesse, he starts skipping rocks out to the ocean, and he's holding the rocks in his left hand. If you look at it, the left hand, visually, when you see the fiend, it's the hurt. But then you take the right hand and it's the heal. Now this guy holds the rocks in his left hand, and then he throws them in his right. And then he lets out a scream, almost a scream of terror, but also screams of relief. And if you look at Bo Dallas, Uncle Howdy, you got the scream. That's always been significant throughout the Bray Wyatt arc. Even the Bludgeon Brothers talk about the scream. The scream is significant. The scream represents Nikki Cross, who has also had this screaming thing that she's done through her whole career. You look at Glasgow Cross, her music, her old entrance theme, and all the other different ones that she's had. It makes a lot of sense. Uh, anyway, this guy Jesse, he's got this long kind of black hair. He kind of hides it. Uh, he has these rough features that don't reflect who he is on the inside. He has this pale skin. And if you look at the VHS tapes, most of the six have this look like they're pale, like they're sick, like they really are sick. Bo Dallas has that black hair going on and features that don't reflect who he is on the inside. I'm thinking maybe that represents Howdy and Bo as one person, and as it gets on, I see more and more of that through this story. It's just so fascinating, guys. Uh, anyway, he gets crashed into the waters, and she's all smiling and giggling about it. And then he screamed at her, and she was in pain again, uh, just like hurt. He, you know, uh, she says, "Are you okay?" And he says, "Yeah, I was in pain, but and I was hurting, but in a way, it was my pride. It was a lot of my pride." And they just start going in about how they're kind of young lovers, and it makes me wonder, is Sister Abigail, I don't know, Abby, Nikki Cross, does she maybe have this secret thing with Uncle Howdy? That's what makes me wonder. Uh, because if you look at it, Nikki Cross, she's submissive to Howdy. Now, I'm not sure if that's gonna be a thing. I'm only speculating here, but maybe Howdy and Nikki Cross, uh, Abby are lovers or something in the story. I just want to throw that out there. I mean, she gets submissive to him. He gets in the rocking chair and she sits calmly right in front of him, uh, almost in a subservient way. Uh, anyway, he looks away at her. This Jesse guy looks away at her, and he covers his eye, and he was peeking through his fingers because she bit her tongue, and she starts bleeding like super blue, bright red blood. And she says, look away, don't look at me." And he keeps looking at her, but kind of just peeking. And if you think about it, the Fiend did that. Bray did that in the Firefly Funhouse. As that version of Bray, he had a significant relationship, what seemed a little bit like maybe a lover standpoint with Abby. So maybe it isn't Howdy. Which there's a little loop, a little. I'll throw you guys for a loop here. Uh, it mentions in this book that she looked at this man who looked like somebody that she knew before, and she thought was the same man. And Uncle Howdy is almost a counterpart to the Fiend. Maybe she's thinking that because Uncle Howdy is similar to Bray and the Fiend, which obviously Sister Abigail knows about, then maybe she thinks that Uncle Howdy is Bray or the Fiend, or she sees the similarities or something. I don't know yet. Now, when this girl, she bites her tongue, then she's kind of slow to speak. She reflects on herself, she reflects on the history with this relationship, and she starts to speak a lot slower, a lot calmer. Uh, like she learned from her mistakes a little bit here and there, or she's beginning to learn from her mistakes that she's made. And Sister Abigail, Bray talked about how Sister Abigail was slow to speak, how she had a demeanor of being calm, a demeanor that if she needed to get nuts, she would, but otherwise, she was very careful in her words, the way that she presented what she wanted to say, which is what it seems like Abby is doing with Uncle Howdy, speaking in riddles, all these different things that she's doing in this book. This what's her name? Fanny, I think that's her name. And he says, "Are you okay?" This Jesse guy says, "Are you okay?" And she smiles at him, reassuring him. But it was almost a kind of a fake, artificial smile, like one of those smiles that you give somebody when they do something kind of dumb, and you don't want to insult them, and you feel kind of down, but like you still smile just because you don't want to make a big deal out of it. That's kind of the vibe that I got with this lady in this book here. And if you think about Sister Abigail and you look at Nikki Cross's mask, you had her smiling before, and then she cries in that VHS, and then she screams. And then after that, all you see from her face, you almost never see her face now. You just see the smiling mask. And I think that might be symbolic to maybe Nikki Cross feels those similarities, and she goes along with it, but maybe she doesn't fully accept what's going on, or maybe she's just accepting it just to accept it because that's the best she has right now. And then it keeps jumping. This book, it keeps mentioning the bright red blood. And Bray Wyatt said, "I'm the color red in a world of black and white." Red and blue, that purplish blue, are huge. And he keeps saying that through this book. These different symbols of lighting with these characters, where they're kind of almost questioning their own self. So they keep discussing this. They go get ice cream. Uh, they keep discussing about this child that's on the way. And she gets in the car and she turns her back to the door. It says specifically, turn her back to the door with her legs spread out, her feet almost by Jesse, who's the driver of the car. And she puts her back against the door so she can lean in and focus to have this conversation with him. Now, I don't know if that's something that happens when you're in that little weird VHS world where maybe you turn the door, or maybe you're not sure of the door and what's out there, but you want to lean into someone that maybe gives you hope or that you've had hope in. Maybe someone you get inspiration from. It goes into huge detail. Man, I've already been talking about this 25 minutes. It's crazy. Uh, so they get this ice cream, and she keeps spewing this blood, and she gets her ice cream into the the cup where the ice cream is, and they discuss that things aren't really what they seem. These ice cream machines uh, more or less bubble up instead of being a thick substance, and it's a way for these different companies and corporate entities to uh, save a lot of money on a sale. So they can, it's like buying a bag of potato chips. You open the bag and it's puffy. The bag is puffy on the outside, but inside you only have maybe half the bag full of chips, right? It's almost that same concept. Uh, put in as little as possible so you can make as much money as you can. Now, that comes into the story a little bit later, too. So he says, "Hey, do you want me to throw away this ice cream?" And she says, "Yeah, go ahead." And he starts walking funny as if he got hit in his nuts. And it kind of reminded her the way he was walking. He's like wobbling, like he got hurt in his nuts, and it made her feel the same. It almost reminded her of how she walked when she felt the pain of when he impregnated her out on the beach near the sea. And when he got her pregnant, and she's kind of smiled at him, kind of disingenuous, and he says, "Well, uh, you seem mad about this whole situation," and she says, "Yeah, it happened around somewhere around April 12th, 13th, or 14th, and it was a dark, warm night, the night that she got pregnant." Now, I was looking at different dates to see if I could find significant information with Bray, and this gets wild here, guys. April 12th of 2019 was the debut of the Firefly Funhouse, uh, where Bray embraces this new beginning from the mistakes that he made as Bray Wyatt, the cult leader. And he starts to embrace this darkness of the Fiend. And we're gonna get into these dates and kind of try to tie it all together. Now, I also looked up April 13th, and I found that on April 13th, 2015, uh, Bray had a promo, and he had his hair down in front of his face, kind of like how you see how he's done and how Sister Abigail looked when they tried to present Sister Abigail on TV. And he cuts this promo, and he starts talking about love. He says, "Love, it becomes an obsession, a sin. Love cannot, love can be blinding." Now, love is blind. You tie that back to Joe Gacy a little bit, and his theme song from NXT, "Love is blind. Grass is always greener on the other side." I'll never leave you. And they say that Joe Gacy has this connection to Bray and what's formulating when Uncle Howdy mentions open your heart to the man in the woods. And then what's funny is that same night that we got that promo, uh, they had their match, their first debut match, and Joe Gacy starts staring at the lantern as they walk down that entranceway. If you notice that, uh, I pointed that out on Facebook, and a lot of people were like, "Oh shit, that's crazy." And it's kind of funny. You have Dexter on the one side and correlation to the sea, and then on the other hand, you have Gacy, who's almost similar to Bray, and love can be blinding. So maybe it's Joe Gacy that she's dancing with in that VHS. We really don't know. We have a lot of different indicators of who it could be, but I'm not sure yet. Now, Bray goes on. He says it can cloud your judgment. It can consume you. It can cost you everything you love. And you're lucky because I can reach down inside you. I can pull out your heart and I can pull out that love like it's a cancer. And I'll fill this now empty void with good old fashioned fear. Fear is stronger than any love. And that gets me to a little bit more with Dexter Loomis. Uncle Howdy brought up fear, running. What do the buzzards do? What do you do when the buzzards come? You run. It's that face of fear that Bray always talked about. He's the new face of fear. And if you think about getting someone pregnant, and you have that love that can be blinding, it can cloud your judgment. It can consume you. I mean, when you stick your what inside of a where, then it can really take you on some wild, crazy shit. Sometimes getting a girl pregnant could be the worst decision because maybe you don't have that everlasting bonding love. And in this story, The Stand, they talk about how she doesn't love him, but he loves her and he wants to get married to her, but she doesn't want to get married because she doesn't love him, which really just comes down to lust and maybe just thinking with your what. Bray goes on in this promo, he says, sooner or later you'll have to watch everything you love fade away. What will you do when the one thing you love is taken from you? And that kind of correlates to Bo. Bo is obsessed with his continuing his brother's legacy and that love. I think that as a character, Uncle Howdy has kind of got that gaslighting shit going on, kind of like how Bray did as a character somewhat. And you can't tell me that they didn't, because that's totally what it is. I mean, look at it. The cave of the allegory of the cave. It's all about gaslighting and taking those people that see something that they think is there or real, and then you gaslight them into thinking something else is real and believe, and you make it seem like it's a light. So if you follow Nightbird, it makes a lot of sense. And this is where it ties together. April 14th of 2014, John Cena challenges Bray Wyatt to a steel cage match at Extreme Rules. Now, if you remember the build-up, he acknowledged that he's the new face of fear. And John Cena's afraid of everything that Bray Wyatt is doing. He's legit terrified. John Cena said for the first time in his life, he was terrified of what he was seeing. And then you notice all of the children that just kind of came out of nowhere, and they surround that steel cage, and Bray Wyatt is singing The Whole World in His Hands. And the kids are singing that. And I just think that's so fascinating that you have the 12th, 13th, and 14th. And when you look at each day and then you look at what happened in this, as far as that goes, it makes a lot of sense to this book. Now, he says that he won't leave her. He won't leave her side. And in this promo earlier, Bray says, fear, you got to fill that void of fear. Uh, Watch everything you fade away, blah, 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 blah. It's all taken from you. And Bray always said, I'll never leave you. He said that a lot, which actually in the Joe Gacy lyrics in his song, grass is greener on the other side, I'll never leave you. It's just... And she says, okay, well, what are our options? What are we going to do? And she lays out different options about maybe have the kid, keep the kid, they get rid of the kid, they have an abortion. Just looking at weighing out all these different options that they could do. And he says that he wanted to commit suicide. And she thought about plucking one of his hands off the wheel, the car that they're driving while they're having this conversation. And she could have pulled his hand away and started giving love and filling that void of emptiness and the space between them, this girl and Jesse. And if you think about it, Bray always said the whole world in his hands. And you got this guy controlling the car, which is, if she pulled that away, they could crash, right? But she lets him maintain that control with his hands to kind of keep their fate in his hands, which is significant to Bray, and the whole world in his hands, And then you get that submissiveness to let him do his thing, right? And then her heart sunk low, and she knew that the laughs and the good times were over for a while. She felt depressed, really sad. She knew that there was a whole bunch of new shit going on, but she had to just trust in the process of whatever the hell was going to happen. She wipes away her tears grimly. And then this guy, Jess, he lights up a cigarette. And she couldn't help to notice the lighting was red. And that reddish blue lighting. And when he lights up his cigarette, it seemed as if it was a face of a man and a boy that were fighting for control of the same face. Which, if you think about it, that's what Abby the Witch did with the Fiend, man. The Fiend had those different light and dark. Bo has Bo and Howdy, and you had the correlation with Abby the Witch and the Fiend, because she said, you just don't want to show the world what kind of sicko you are. And she kind of sees the Fiend, Bray, kind of fighting back and forth in the Firefly Funhouse, and you have that dark and light side, you have the hurt, you have the heal. And that reminds me of the left and the right hand, when this guy's holding the rocks in the left hand and throws it with the right, almost in a screaming manner. And so they start talking about all their different options, and he says, oh, didn't you take the pill? I thought you were on the pill. And she says, yeah, I must have forgotten about it. I must have not taken it. And he says, I took you at your word that you did this and that you took it. And she was mad. And he says, well, am I wrong? Why are you so angry? And she says, you weren't wrong, but that doesn't change the fact that he basically smacked her upside the face to get her to stop crying. This guy did. And she's kind of mad at him. Kind of how it seemed like Abigail the witch in the Firefly Funhouse. Bray said, "Oh, I got this light and dark shit going on, basically," and Abby the witch makes a joke out of it and says, "You're just a sicko, bro. Like, you know what you're doing. You're just a sick ass bastard, really." And then Bray gets kind of pissed off with Abby. Uh, and it goes on. Uh, he said he wanted to marry her in this book. This Jesse guy says, "I want to marry you." And she says, "I don't want to marry you." And she starts questioning her love for him. And he just started losing his mind, having a face of a man that looks like loose bolts rattling around in a machine, basically. And she thought it was funny. And he says, "You don't love me?" And he was silent. And she says, they start talking about suicide uh, and the different options. And she says, "Well, you're going to have to pick a different option." And he says, "Well, I can't pick another option because you don't want to talk about it. You just want to win points off me. You scored several points off me in the last few weeks." And if you think about it with Bray and Abby in the Firefly Funhouse when they debuted, uh, she kind of did the same thing with Bray a little bit. You don't know you just don't want to show what sicko you are, those kind of remarks. And then he'd snap back a little bit, and then she would go silent. And that's kind of what this girl's doing in the story, too. Uh, she says, I need a little time to think, too. And he slapped her upside the face because she was making fun of him. And then she ends up getting kind of mad. And he ends up apologizing and saying, "I'm sorry, Fran." And she says, "It's okay, apology accepted." Uh, she kind of just accepts the apology, but not fully. She kind of tells him that she forgives him. And if you think about it with Bray, he says, "Oh, I was a sicko, but, you forgive me, right?" And the kids in the little Firefly Funhouse are like, "Yeah, we forgive you, yeah." And then he brings out the Fiend, and you get more revelations about who the Fiend is, and his contrast between light and dark, and trying to get over his past mistakes too. Anyway, time goes on. They sit in silence, and she holds her hands in her lap and looks kind of calmly. And if you look at Sister Abigail, she kind of got the same thing going on. And anyway, this girl, she starts looking at these houses that are owned by professors and teachers and doctors and lawyers and things, and how you have all these different people move in, and the world around them started changing. So where you get these high profile people, these new families move into these houses, and it kind of changes the environment about everything. And it goes into how these kids would go to with their parents to lobster dinners, and then they would go to some playhouse to relax while the adults are indulging themselves. And if you think about it, Bray always kind of talked about indulging yourself, pretending, oh, your parents don't believe in monsters. They have all these other visions of life and things of grandeur, and they lie to you. They don't tell you that there's all this crazy stuff, these things made of nightmares. And it mentions this playhouse, Firefly Funhouse. You got the kids. I mean, shit. It's almost writing itself, right? And you look at it, and it's this story starts progressing just like how Bray did with the Fiend and some of the Wyatt Six. It says that these kids that wander up and down the main streets like street people. If you look at Bray's old Live in Fear, he's talking about people wandering up and down the main streets, just kind of aimlessly, uh, like some kind of weirdo or something. And it kind of implies that that's what these kids do. And and then Jess says, "I'm sorry, you forgive me. I never meant to do." He says, "I never meant to do that." And she says, "I know." And then he says, "I love you." And uh, she says, "Well, I don't really believe it at all, but I'll accept your good graces." And she says, "Are you going back to Portland?" Because he's from Portland, I believe it was. Or was it Portland or Seattle? I can't remember which. Anyway, he's from this other place, right? And she says, "Are you going to bike back there?" And he says, "Well, I think we should figure it out in the morning. Take me back to the beach, uh, wherever they were driving from, right?" They're just kind of driving around for a while, and he says, "Take me back, and then I'll grab my bike and I'll leave. You should call me sometime." And she says, "Okay, uh, whatever. And he takes off, and um, she says, "We'll figure things out in the morning." And then she slid behind the wheel and felt very tired. And if you remember when Abby the Witch, she had all this stuff with Bray, "Oh, you're a sicko. You don't want to show what a sicko you are." And you get these things from Abby the Witch saying, "I just want to sleep. I'm tired. Why do you keep trying to talk to me? I'm just tired." Man, it's the same thing. It's significant. Uh, he says, "Will you call me?" She smiles artificially. She says, "We'll see." And for the second time that day, she accused him in her mind of purposely portraying himself that way, turning his back to the sea, trying to portray himself in a different way. But she kind of knew that he was trying to put on some kind of front for her, and that he knew exactly what he was doing. And if you think about Bray, he knew what he was. That's the same thing happened. He said, "I know what I'm doing. I got this whole new identity, and there are no other options. So I've got no choice but to bring out the Fiend at that point." It just reminds me of that. Uh, she says she wonders if the ocean would look the same as it had looked before all of this had happened. She could smell the ocean just as she could taste her bitter tears, and she just continued spitting up blood. And she's just kind of thinking about what she's experienced, reflecting on herself, which reminds me of Abby, Nikki Cross. Look at yourself. Look what you've become. And this whole chapter was her self-reflection with this guy that kind of puts on this different attitude and these different things that he knows are bullshit. And that was chapter 2. I got done with that. I'm going to start chapter 3 sometime. I am about 49 minutes into this video right now. I'm assuming every video I make on this the stand, I think I'm going to do every 2 chapters. I'm going to make a video. It took me about an hour to read, and people are saying that that the book duration if you read it. Normally, it'll take you about 11 hours. So I'm thinking maybe this will span over about 5 different videos. And we'll see how it goes. But I don't want to make my videos over an hour long, like I said, guys. I'm going into this book kind of blind. No pun intended. But it's just so fascinating so far. Like, I've been hooked. And I highly recommend it so far. I made 8 pages of notes, all of these notes. And I'm only 2 chapters in, guys. So we'll see how it goes. I appreciate it if you stick around and have stuck around through this video. If you like what I make, please subscribe and like my videos. Comment below what you guys think. I want to hear what you think. It'd be nice to hear some of that feedback from you guys, my audience, and we can have this discussion together. I want my channel to be kind of a place you guys can discuss with each other and bounce off these ideas, and we all just kind of look at these Easter eggs and learn about this significant things that point to Bray and his story arc. So I really hope you guys do those. Like, comment, subscribe, share this out. Stay tuned for more. And all I gotta say is he's got the whole world in his hands. Much love. Peace.
He's got you and me, sister, in his hands. He's got you and me, brother, in his hands. He's got everybody here in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
Deep